of the Enlightenment. But what is enlightenment as a kind of a, if you can say that it's a kind of um, a philosophy, a way of looking at things. Okay, so Shomita is saying a European intellectual movement of the late 17th and 18th centuries. Okay, so what was this movement about? What was this intellectual movement about, Shomita?
Sir, it
Sir,
gives.
here,
Okay, first Shomita, or was it Shampurna who unmuted? Who was the
so
first
me,
person?
Sampurna.
Okay, so first go ahead, Shampurna, and then Ria.
Sir, here enlightenment is about being superior in knowledge. Since we are
What?
talking about you, and it's 18th century, so it's about gaining knowledge.
So it's a movement about gaining knowledge. What
Yes.
kind of knowledge? Any particular kind of knowledge, or just knowledge in general? Okay, Ria, you can have a go at it.
So I want to say that it gives the importance towards individualism instead of this tradition, norms, or this kind of things. Individualism is more important, and here comes the reason.
So you are trying to say that during enlightenment, or in enlightenment, or the movement of enlightenment was about individualism.
Also, intellectual knowledge.
So intellectual knowledge and individualism, where do you see them getting connected? Is there any connection between individuality and you know the search for knowledge? So is it an individual's search for knowledge? Can we say that enlightenment is an intellectual movement that laid emphasis on the individual search for knowledge? Will that be a proper description of enlightenment? Well,
Sir,
yeah, yeah.
sir, the word enlightenment means the education that result in understanding and spread of knowledge.
Okay.
And the movement or the age of enlightenment uh, was the intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated Europe in 17th and 18th century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
I mean,
that
yeah.
is the rejection of traditional social, religious, political ideas, and then
Okay.
emphasis or rationalism.
Yes, so if you talk about enlightenment as a movement and not as a age in the history of English literature or history of philosophical philosophy, then enlightenment, as Ungira points out, is the seeking of rationality, seeking of rationalism. Rational thoughts are sought and discussed, and it's a rejection of the traditional aspects of sorry. Okay, sorry, I had lost connections in between, and I guess a few of you had to leave, and you can rejoin anytime. So, okay, why don't you guys give me 5 minutes? Sorry for that interruption, but if I don't fix something, then this interruption might happen. So the storm a few days back might have had hit something. So just give me 5 minutes. I will see if I'll make sure that the disconnection does not happen. Okay. Okay, sorry for that interruption. So yeah, enlightenment was a movement. Enlightenment was a concept. Enlightenment was a way of looking at things which emphasized reason over emotion, individual or collective. It was an empiricist way of looking at things. Like if you talk about knowledge, then the kind of knowledge that the Enlightenment philosophers wanted to obtain was the knowledge based on empirical facts, knowledge based on real experience and immersive sorry engagement with the subject of um, the subject of the search, whatever these intellectual people, whatever these intellectuals were searching. So they were looking for evidence based knowledge, not abstract knowledge in its, not knowledge in its abstract form, but evidence based knowledge. So let's now go into the text once we know that David Hume is was a Enlightenment philosopher, and one of the aspects of Enlightenment philosophy was it emphasized on reason rather than on emotion. It emphasized observation. It emphasized on empirical evidence of knowledge. That if you do not have something really solid in your hands, then you do not know about it. Okay, so the word empiricism was highlighted during this Enlightenment, and it is an Enlightenment is something that was going on in parallel with the neoclassical age in English literature, because Enlightenment was not only concentrated in England, though David Hume was a Scottish person, but it was happening all over Europe. I mean, all over Western Europe. Okay, so let's get into this text while keeping in mind the topics. Okay, so the topics from David Hume are all the perceptions of the human mind resolve themselves into two distinct kinds, and the question is, what are those? Briefly explain. And the second question is, what is the difference between impressions and ideas? So we will be talking about this in our in this class. So all the perceptions of the human mind resolve themselves into two distinct kinds. So whatever the human mind sees, whatever the perceptions of the human mind are, they resolve themselves into two distinct kinds. So there are basically, according to Hume, two distinct and two basic kinds of input data. Okay, perceptions here means input data, whatever we see, whatever we feel, whatever we understand about the world that is around us. They can be categorized into two distinct kinds according to Hume. So what are these two distinct kinds? And that is the basic question, because if these questions are of 5 marks, then you don't really need to go into minute details about it. You can just mention these two terms and just try to give a 1 line, 2 line description or definition of these terms, and you are good to go for 5 marks. So which I shall call impressions and ideas. So there are two types of human perceptions according to David Hume. They are impressions and ideas. Okay, so we need to work the definition of these two terms. What do they mean? What do they mean by impressions and ideas? So he says that the difference betwixt means between. This is a kind of a little oldish English. So the difference betwixt these consists in the degrees of force and liveliness with which they strike upon the mind. So, and make their way into our thought or consciousness. So, the difference between impressions and ideas lies in the degree of the force and liveliness with which they strike upon the mind. So, the difference between impressions and ideas are that one has a greater degree of force, another has a lesser degree of force, but both strike the mind, not something that is sensual, nothing that is related to the senses, but everything is related to the mind. Those perceptions which enter with most force and violence we may name impressions, and under this name I comprehend all our sensations, passions and emotions as they make their first appearance in the soul. So impressions are those that enter with the most force and violence. So impressions are forceful and violent, and we can further divide impressions into sensations, passions and emotions. So David Hume is trying to point out that as opposed to ideas, impressions, which comprise of sensations, passions and emotions, are violent in nature, are forceful in nature. By their very nature they are violent and forceful. Okay, so passion, emotion, sensations, all of them are forceful, they have a lot of energy and they are violent. We will talk about what violence exactly means here, but only in opposition to the ideas which might not be so violent. Anyway, so he says, by ideas I mean the faint images of these in thinking and reasoning, such as, for instance, are all the perceptions excited by the present discourse, except only those which arise from the sight and touch, and accepting the immediate pleasure or uneasiness it may occasion. So what does he mean by ideas? He means by ideas the faint images of these in thinking and reasoning. That is, what are those? What are the images of these? The images belong to sensations, passions, and emotions when they are thought in the mind. When we try to reason them. So he gives an instance. He says that are all the perceptions excited by the present discourse. So whenever we are in a particular situation, whenever we are talking, whenever we are doing something, so perceptions gets excited. We take in a lot of stimuli. We take in a lot of stimuli, we take in a lot of data inside our mind, and accepting only those which arise from the sight and touch, and accepting the immediate pleasure or uneasiness it may concern. So things that arise immediately, which arise from sight and touch and other such senses, cause immediate pleasure or uneasiness, whatever. I mean, it can go both ways. The sight and the touch, or the words that we hear, or the smell that we take, might make us feel good, or they might make us feel uneasy. However, one of the chief qualities of impressions then is that it is temporary. It passes as opposed to ideas, which are the faint images which arise when we think about what we saw, what we felt, what we touched, what we smelt, what we heard, so on and so forth. Okay, so say suppose I'll now try to give my example. For example, who among you have recently been to say hill station or some place where you enjoyed yourself in your, I don't know, you did not have holidays, but still, did any one of you go to any hill station or something like for a vacation? Is Progga in our meeting today here? No. I understand that Progga went to Kashmir, but I don't know if anyone of you have been to a place which was very soothing to the eyes, which was very uh, which was pleasurable to look at. No, none of you. Ria, yes.
But not recently, sir.
Not recently. Maybe you went sometimes in the past. So what was it? Where did you go?
Yes, sir, I went to Kashmir and Shillong too.
Okay, so you went to Kashmir and you went to Shillong as well. So when you went to Kashmir, maybe you went to Sonmarg or you went to the Dal Lake. Maybe you saw a snow-clad mountain. Maybe you smelt the tulips in the tulip garden. Maybe you smelt the kesar from the kesar gardens or kesar farms, whatever they are. Maybe you touched the apples growing in the apple orchard. Uh, when you were within this experience, you were not thinking that okay, I will relish this, or you were not thinking and feeling all at the same time. So according to Hume, we cannot feel and think all at the same time. Okay, so when I'm looking at the snow-clad mountains, I'm just looking at them, taking in the perception of this beautiful snow, this beautiful white snow on the mountain, and the sun is rising or it's sinking, and it's creating a beautiful image. But when we are back to our clammy city, when we are back to our not so beautiful city, depends upon where you live in the city. Many of its places are really ugly. Uh, or maybe you came back from Kashmir via train, I don't know, and you go out and you see the filth of Howrah station, and you're like, oh my god, so I saw this and now I'm seeing this. Anyway, so when we see something, when we feel something, when we eat something, when we hear something, we do not automatically start to think and feel or hear at the same time. However, our memory of sight, our memory of smell, our memory of hearing, touch, taste, all of these things linger in our mind. We do not forget it. And then we start to think about it. Like, okay, I saw this mountain which was clad with snow, and the sun was rising, and it reminds me of the calmness of Kashmir, or it is the hallmark of the beauty of Kashmir, or the clouds around a mountain, or our hotel room in Shillong reminds me, or I can compare this image with the image of an old man wearing a muffler around his or her neck. So the mountain is the old man or the old woman, and she or he is wearing a muffler. Well, not the way the muffler is worn by Bengali people, but like the usual use of muffler, which is wrapped around the neck, not around the head, which Bengali people know. Anyway, so there is a time when we are in a particular experience and we are doing it, we are not thinking about it. I'll try to use a cheeky example here. Say, for example, you are flirting with someone, you are in love with someone, and it's been, say, a week or a month when the love is at the highest, and we are always chatting and typing, as even when we are doing a class, we are like chatting and typing with the friend that we have acquired recently. um, we do not think much, we do not engage into too much thinking before saying something silly. uh, but then maybe if there's a breakup, or if the relationship matures from a passionate, stormy uh, um, encounter into a kind of a calm, cool, easygoing relationship where the person turns into a friend, or the person turns into a kind of a long-term friend. And then when we go back to these messages that we had exchanged earlier, we often laugh at our silliness, or we often laugh at the way we were hungry to message, or hungry to talk, or to meet. So this is the difference between impression and ideas. Impressions are spontaneous, impressions are temporary, impressions are um, unthought of and unthought about, whereas ideas refers to the act of reflecting upon all of these perceptions, all of these sensations and passions, and all of these things that we have seen, touched, felt, or heard. When we think about it, that what have we done, and sometimes if it's a good memory, we smile. We smile to ourselves, and our friends or our parents in the house, they smirk, or they make fun of us that we are smiling to ourselves, but we remember something that had been done by us. And if it's a bad one, if it's something that was unpleasant, we cry, or we become irritated, and we become sad, depending upon what we did, say, sometimes ago. So according to David Hume, according to Hume's philosophy, the the all of the perceptions can be categorized into either impressions, which are spontaneous, which are like right now, which are like happening, which is based on our passions, emotions, and sensations, and then ideas, which occur when our mind has achieved an objective distance from those passions, emotions, and sensations. Okay, is the thing clear up till now, or is it, because this is philosophical, so this will be a little dense. The extract might be short, but it is dense. Is it clear for all of you as to what I'm
Yes,
what?
sir.
Okay. Anyone who has a doubt, or I can multiply the examples if you want. I mean, I can try to. Okay, let me take an example of literature, from literature. Okay, because after all, we are going to apply it to literature, right? So we all know about Wordsworth's famous uh, definition of poetry, that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, and then later in the preface he says that they are also emotions recollected in tranquility. So you must be spontaneous in your, according to Wordsworth, you can be, you should be spontaneous in your reactions to a particular, I won't say just an impression, but also to ideas. Like uh, if it is not a spontaneous reaction, then perhaps it is kind of fake. Like when you see a friend whom you have missed for a very long time, a friend who has been absent from your life for a very long time, and when you see this friend of yours, you go and you like hug him or her, and you like your eyes get moist because you have seen that person after a very long time, then that is spontaneous. But if you rehearse that, okay, my friend is going to come and I'm going to pick him or her from the bus stop or from the station or from the airport, and I need to cry, I need to scream when that person comes to me, otherwise that person might think that I don't love that person anymore. If you rehearse it at your home, then it's not spontaneous, and then perhaps your relationship, perhaps your friendship towards this particular person is not really um, warm. If you need to rehearse your friendship, if you need to rehearse your emotions, then according to Wordsworth, according to the romantic ideals of poetry or literature, you are not you are faking your emotions. Um, so in literature, say suppose the similar situation occurs that two lovers meet after a long time, or two friends meet after a long time, and they uh, do silly stuff with each other which makes us laugh, or gives us joy to look at them. um, I don't know if I can take an example from a piece of literature. uh, Say suppose this meeting between Lucy McHeath and Polly. Lucy's reaction towards McHeath when she realizes that he is playing with her, emotions, was authentic, and she was like, he should die and McHeath should pay for his crimes and stuff like that. So that was spontaneous. That was impression. But then she thought, this impression led to an idea, and she realized that at least let McHeath live, because Polly was also saying the same thing. Whether McHeath lives with Polly or not, Polly does not care about it much, but she wants, or both Lucy and Polly wants McHeath to live. So that could be an example of how uh, impressions and ideas work. Like when you do something, all of a sudden then you think what you have done later and then try to correct your course. That could be that could be a application of the David Hume's distinction of impressions and ideas. Okay, let's go ahead. I believe it will not be necessary to employ many words in explaining this distinction. Every one of himself will readily perceive the difference betwixt feeling and thinking. The common degrees of these are easily distinguished, though it is not impossible, but in particular instances they may nearly approach to each other. So this is something that is nicely said, nicely mentioned by Hume that their distinction is easy for us to understand, because there is hardly anyone who would not understand the difference between thinking and feeling. But I think it is very difficult sometimes to distinguish between thinking and feeling. So when you are thinking, you are not feeling, and when you are feeling, you are not thinking. Many philosophers, many thinkers have different views on this. I would like you to tell me what could be the difference, or or what is your experience of this dichotomy between thinking and feeling. I would like more people to talk, maybe Tomojita, maybe Nisha, maybe Kea, Jinia. Uh, if you could share your thoughts about this, that if you, when you are feeling, are you not thinking, or when you are thinking, you are not feeling. Is this true about our own? Because after all, David Hume was an empirical philosopher. He wanted evidences. So is there evidence in our life which says that, you know, when we think we don't feel, when we feel we don't think, or there's a real distinction between feeling and thinking? Tomojita, would you like to say something? Tomojita? Okay, anyone else? Kea?
Yes, sir, I think
Hmm.
so.
Okay, tell me more.
Uh, because আপনি একটা এক্সাম্পল দিলেন
Hmm.
টিউলিপ গার্ডেনের কথা,
Hmm.
কাশ্মীরে। তো
Hmm.
কেউ ওখানে ফিল নিলে, তো এনজয়
Hmm.
করলে, সে এই ক্লামসি এরিয়ার কথা ভাববে না।
Hmm.
আর
ওকে, তো তার মানে যখন আমি টিউলিপগুলোকে শুঁকছি বা টিউলিপগুলোকে দেখছি, ফিল করছি, তখন আমি আমাদের যে ক্লামজি এরিয়া আছে, বা আমাদের কলকাতা, বা আমাদের জীবনের কষ্টের ব্যাপারে আমরা ভাববো, তাই তো?
ইয়েস স্যার, মানে কিছু
ওকে। হুম।
কিছুক্ষণের জন্য আমি অন্তত ভুলে থাকবো।
ওকে, তো ফিলিং ফিলিং যখন আমার হচ্ছে, তখন আমি অ্যাটলিস্ট কিছুক্ষণের জন্য থিঙ্কিং করব না। থিঙ্কিংটা ব্যাকসিটে থাকবে, বা থিঙ্কিংটা হবে না, আর আমি শুধু ওই পারসেপশনসগুলোকে নিতে ব্যস্ত থাকবো।
ইয়েস স্যার।
ওকে। ওকে, মানে এটা তোমার সাথে হয় আর কি, মানে তুমি মানে যখন কোনো ফিলিংয়ে থাকো, তখন থিঙ্কিং করো না, তাই তো?
সামটাইমস।
Sometimes. Okay, but if it is sometimes, then does it happen that you think and feel all at the same time? Are they mutually exclusive? That is my question. Like, ভাব, মানে ফিল করছি, ভাবছি না, ভাবছি না, ফিল করছি, এরকম ব্যাপারটা আর কি। Well, you see how difficult it becomes when you think deeply about it. Like, okay, so what is happening right now? এখন কি হচ্ছে?
Sir, I think
হুম।
the
হুম।
both is going parallelly.
Okay, so Ongira thinks we think and feel all at the same time.
So me too. They
Hmm.
are interrelated.
They are interrelated. How are they interrelated?
Yes, sir. When we think something or
Hmm.
when we feel something like
Hmm.
some happy moments or some sad stories or
Hmm.
like that,
Hmm.
side by side we are thinking in our brain that
Hmm.
what happened then. Uh, so I think it's going parallelly because both are interrelated. Uh, like
So, interrelated in the sense that they trigger each other, or are you trying to say that the moment we start to feel, the very moment we start to think as well?
that the moment when we feel, after that we think about it, মানে এটা
Mm-hmm.
like automatically we think something, because that's human brain structures that when we feel or when we uh, imagine something, that
Mm-hmm.
is always we think about it.
Now, imagining and thinking might be bracketed together, but my my point is, say suppose I well you're hurt, like your finger is bleeding, you have cut yourself, or a safety pin or something has pierced your skin, and you are hurting, you are smarting under that pain, you're feeling the pain. What are you thinking then? When something like this happens, when we feel the pain, which is one of the sensations, what are we thinking all at the same time? Like I'll try to give another example. Say like um, we have cut our finger, and we say ooh, something like this, and when we look at the blood that might be coming out, or the hurt, the wound that is there, at that point in time, would you agree or disagree that we are thinking also? Can feeling and thinking happen all at the same time?
So not that very moment we are thinking,
Mm-hmm.
But
but
then,
But it
sir,
leads, yeah.
suppose if our finger gets cut by a
Hmm.
knife, then
Hmm.
obviously we might think that I shouldn't have touched that knife at that moment, or else the cut wouldn't have happened to me.
So when you're thinking that you should not have had touched the knife, are you not feeling the pain, or are you?
Yes, I am feeling the pain.
Okay, so I'm feeling the pain and I'm like shaking my hand, and at the same time I'm thinking that I should not have had touched this knife. Okay? You see, this is a difficult thing to put our fingers on. It depends upon the incident, it depends upon the feeling, it depends upon the person, it depends upon the situation, whether we are thinking and feeling all at the same time or not. According to Hume, these two faculties are very different to each other. If you ask me, I personally think that when somebody mentioned that this thing is happening parallelly, that we are thinking and we are feeling all at the same time, maybe we are not thinking consciously. We are feeling consciously, but we are not thinking consciously. Or we are thinking consciously and feeling subconsciously. But David Hume did not know that, or did not talk about this rupture between our conscious and unconscious minds. It was only that it was only after Freud or Jung or Lacan that we realized that there is some difference, there is some fracture between our conscious and unconscious or subconscious selves. Um, and we can feel and we can think simultaneously, but many people would say that no, I cannot do two things all at the same time. Either I can take in the perceptions of beauty, of i can I can eat, or I can take in the flavor of a particular thing with great jest and joy, and but when I am eating, when I'm having fun, or when I'm looking at a flower, or maybe talking to my favorite person, I am not really thinking, but maybe at the back of the mind there is some thought process that is going on. But for Hume, it was definitely engaging in two different things, two different ideas when you are feeling and when you are thinking. Yes, Shomita has written something. এই যে এক্সাম দিতে দিতে হাজারো গানের কথা ভাবি, আমি এটা কি ফিলিং আর থিঙ্কিং একসাথে হচ্ছে? Yes, yes, so that's exactly what I was trying to tell you, that we are doing something like exam dewa, we are giving an exam, we are sitting for an exam, we are writing an answer on something, and a song goes inside our mind that golmaal hai bhai sab golmaal hai kind of song. Or maybe you are, if you are motivated, the song of Lakshya, like yahi lakshya hai tera, goes on in your mind. So aren't you feeling the heat of the examination, feeling that, feeling hot because your mind is working or overworking, or you are getting irritated at the examiner for giving you a very tough question, or you are getting angry at the invigilator because that invigilator is not allowing you to talk to your friend and get the answer, but at the same time your mind has wandered off to some place where you are not supposed to be there at that time, but then you bring your mind um, back. Okay, so that is I mean, we can argue that um, that thinking and feeling happen all at the same time, but are we aware of this? The moment we become aware, we stop doing one and engage in another. But I believe, it is my personal opinion, that things happen simultaneously, for me at least, because later I realized that okay, I have been thinking this instead of feeling this. I have been doing this, or I have been feeling this, I have been thinking about this. Okay, and I sometimes feel guilty, sometimes I feel nice that I have been doing both of them together. Thus, in sleep, in a fever, in madness, or in any violent emotions of soul, our ideas may approach to our impressions. As on the other hand, it sometimes happens that our impressions are so faint and low that we cannot distinguish them from our ideas. We think we saw someone, we think we smelled something, we think we touched something, especially in sleep. Like if you are sleeping and you by mistake touch maybe the water bottle lying at your side, which the water bottle might be cold to touch, all of a sudden you might feel that you have touched a snake and you wake up. So the more your mind is in turmoil, the less the distinction between feeling and thinking. This is the classical situation of hallucination. In hallucination, there is no distinction between thinking and feeling. You think what you feel what you think. So what happens there is that when you are mad, or when you are asleep, or when you are hallucinating, that you think there is a real snake in your hand, or you think that your body is really on fire and you start to scream because you are thinking the pain and feeling it as well, all at the same time. And this happens at a heightened state of mental activity. But the other way around, when you are feeling something, say Somita's case might be a point here. that when you are feeling a pressure, when you are feeling the pressure of the examinations, and yet you are thinking about something which is not related to your examination, and you are like thinking about going off to vacations, or you're thinking about your friend, and you're thinking about maybe you'll uh, go on a boat ride. um, so the feeling does not really translate into thinking, but the thinking can often be translated into feeling if you are in a heightened state of emotional or mental turmoil. But the other way around, the other thing can also happen, that when you are feeling something, you are thinking about it also. I don't know if I'll search for an appropriate example when this happens, that when you're thinking, you're feeling, when you're feeling, you're thinking as well. uh, okay, say you are warming your hands, like warming is touch based.
Sir, during interview, I mean before
Hmm.
interview time,
How can you explain?
স্যার ইন্টারভিউর আগে তো মানে একটা টেনশন কাজ করে, যেমন আপনি বলেন ওয়ার্মিং হ্যান্ডস, তো সব
Hmm.
থিঙ্কটাও আসে কেমন কোশ্চেন আসবে, কিভাবে রিপ্রেজেন্ট করবো বা কোনো কিছু, তো তখন থিঙ্কিং টেনশন মানে দুটো তো
Hmm.
সাইমালটেনিয়াস চলছে, তো সেটা কি বুঝিং না থিঙ্কিং টুগেদার হচ্ছে?
আম, যে ফিলিংটার কথা তুমি বলছো সেটাকে বলা যেতে পারে অ্যাংজাইটি, তাই তো? অ্যাংজাইটি, টেনশন হচ্ছে তোমার, সেটা তোমার মাথার মধ্যে চলছে। বাট আই ওয়ান্ট সামথিং মোর ট্যাঞ্জিবল ফিলিং, লাইক যেটা আমি বলতে যাচ্ছিলাম, যে ধরো বনফায়ার হয়েছে, বনফায়ারের কাছে গিয়ে তুমি বসেছো এবং তুমি তোমার হাতটা আগুনের কাছাকাছি নিয়ে গেছো, আর ওটাকে গরম করছো, হাতগুলোকে গরম করছো, একটা ফিলিং অফ ওয়ার্মথ হচ্ছে তোমার। And at the same time, in your mind, you are thinking about the warm embrace of your beloved, or your friend, or your mother, or your father, or your sister, brother, whoever. So this warmth triggered that warmth, and while you are taking in the sensation of the warmth via your hand, your mind is thinking about a different kind of warmth, which might be empirically, physically warm, and mentally warm as well. So this is a point at which feeling and thinking might unite. Might, not always. But I felt that if I am doing this, if I am getting warm in front of a bonfire, and at the same time, as soon as I started getting warm, I am thinking not about the warmth that I'm getting from the fire, but the warmth that I get from the physical embrace of my wife, or my child, or my mother, or my parents, or my friend, or whoever. Okay, so this can be an example, but I think feeling uh, is so acute that you think and feel all at the same time. Might happen. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it is. I think it happens less than when it happens that uh, the thinking is so acute that it transforms into a physical feeling. Okay. But notwithstanding this near resemblance in a few instances, they are in general so very different that no one can make a scruple to rank them under distinct heads and assign to each a peculiar name to mark the difference. So, peculiar name to mark the difference has a footnote, and it says, I here make use of these terms, impression and idea, in a sense different from what is usual, and I hope this liberty will be allowed me. Perhaps I rather restore the word idea to its original sense, from which Mr. Locke had perverted it, in making it stand out for all our perceptions. By the term of impression, I would not be understood to express the manner in which our lively perceptions are produced in the soul, but merely the perceptions themselves, for which there is no particular name either in English or any other language that I know of. Now, this is interesting. He is okay about the idea and stuff, but when he makes his distinction that in I would not be understood to express the manner in which our lively perceptions are produced in the soul, but merely the perceptions themselves. Perceptions themselves, the five senses, and any other kind of perception that we might have, and there is no particular name of that in English. When we smell, what do we really do? Like, we are taking in the air that is touching a flower, and the air is entering into our nostrils, and we are our mind is given signals through some neurotransmitters that okay, this smells nice. So what is really happening here? So we are smelling something nice, we are smelling a flower, and so what is the crux of this activity? Like, when we are smelling a flower, we are taking in the air. If there had been no air, then we would not have been able to smell the flower, right? So the air is touching the flower, the smelly parts of the flower, and the smelly parts of the flower, the air that is touching the smelly parts of the flower is entering into our nose. There are certain organs, there are certain neurotransmitters which are triggered, and this message is sent to the mind, and the mind is telling okay, body or mind, whatever it is, smell more, or this smells nice, you feel good. And hence Hume says that there is no particular name for this. Smelling is not smelling itself is not good or bad, but what we are smelling might be good or might be bad. Okay, so everything that we sense is due to some kind of chemical activity that is happening in our body and in our mind. So when you smell something that you have not smelled ever, how does the mind distinguish that this smell is nice or this smell is not? Because you are smelling it for the first time, and if it smells nice, then you simply say it smells nice. ভালো ভালো গন্ধ তো, আবার শুঁকছি, ভালো গন্ধ। যদি কোনো একটা খারাপ গন্ধ থাকে তাহলে আমরা সেটাকে আর শুঁকতে চাইবো না, এবং আমরা সেটাকে বাজে গন্ধ বলবো। But strangely, when we smell something nice or foul for the first time, we don't name it, we can't name it, because we have done it for the first time. নেক্সট টাইম যখন আবার ওই জিনিসটাকেই আমরা দেখবো বা শুকবো, তখন আমরা বুঝতে পারবো যে আচ্ছা হ্যাঁ, এইটা তো আগেও এরকম আমি দেখেছিলাম এবং এটা আমার এই এক্সপিরিয়েন্সটা হয়েছিল। ওকে, সো দ্যাট ইজ ওয়াই হিউম সেজ দ্যাট they are merely perceptions, there is no name for them. Something that we feel suddenly is we cannot name what we are doing, but we uh, we use metonymies, we use synecdoches to say, okay, I smelt it, I saw it, I felt it, I heard it, I tasted it, I understood it. But what is this it? That is something beyond our understanding for the time being. But we do feel all of these things, and we do think about these things. Okay. I'll try to give an example. Say suppose this is going to be a little difficult for me. Say suppose you felt something that you have never felt before. Uh, uh, you feel an extreme of joy, you feel an extreme of pain, you feel an extreme of peace, but you have not felt ever. Like if you have seen that movie Kung Fu Panda. In Kung Fu Panda, we have heard about we saw that the the spiritual guide or the guru of the panda and all of those animals finds or tries to find inner peace. We don't know what inner peace is, but sometimes something might happen to us which might give us inner peace, which we don't know, and since we do not know about it, we cannot much think about it. Okay, so when we feel it, we cannot name it, and since some feelings are so deep that we don't want to talk about it, we don't even want to think about it. Okay, so this is where this thinking and feeling cross each other or diverge from each other a lot. Okay, there is another division of our perceptions which it will be convenient to observe, and which extends itself both to our impressions and ideas. This division is into simple and complex. Simple perceptions or impressions and ideas are such as admit of no distinction nor separation. The complex are the contrary to these and may be distinguished into parts. Though a particular color, taste, and smell are qualities all united together in this apple, it is easy to perceive they are not the same, but are at least distinguishable from each other. So he gives a example of eating an apple. So he makes another distinction between perceptions, that some perceptions can be simple and some perceptions can be complex. Some ideas, the simple and complex, can be further divided into simple feelings and simple ideas, complex feelings and complex ideas. So he gives an example that in simple ideas or simple feelings we cannot make any distinction. Okay, but in complex ideas or feelings we can make distinction. So as an example of a complex idea, complex feeling, he gives us the example of eating an apple. What happens with an apple? An apple we can touch, hold, an apple we can eat, the same apple we can eat, we can thus taste, we can smell, we can see. So all of these five senses are invested into eating or consuming of an apple. So this is a complex impression that is happening, all of these things happening all at the same time. What can be an example of a simple perception? What can be an example of a simple idea? Simple impression could be of pain, acute pain. হঠাৎ করে ছোট ভাই বা দিদি বা দাদা এসে ঠাস করে একটা মানে পিঠটা ঘেমে রয়েছে, তার মধ্যে একটা ঠাস করে একটা চড় মেরে দিল. Just imagine what happens. You feel you feel pain first, and then maybe you feel anger. So it's pretty simple. চড় মারলো কেউ, তুমি তুমি ফিল করলে পেনটা। এটার মধ্যে খুব বেশি কিছু জিনিস নেই, যেমন কাঁটা ফুটে গেল, করলে ব্যথা লাগলো, ফিলিং পেন। You will not be interested about কিসে লাগলো, কেন লাগলো, লাগার কোনো কারণ ছিল কি না, কাঁটাটাকে বেশ সুন্দর দেখতে, কাঁটাটার গন্ধটা শুঁকি। নো, কাঁটা হাতে যে মুহূর্তে ফুটছে সেই মুহূর্তে তুমি ব্যথা অনুভব করছো, সিম্পল। তোমার ফেভারিট টিম জিতে গেল, লাস্ট যে পয়েন্টটা হলো, ফুটবল হলো বা ক্রিকেট হলো, লাস্ট যে পয়েন্টটা দেখা গেল যে তোমার টিম জিতে গেছে, you feel joy, simple. You don't think, okay, the run rate of this person is low and what happens if they lose in the next round. They don't feel these kinds of things. Okay, so this is it from David Hume's of the origin of our ideas. And I think when we were talking about the two distinct, and we were talking about distinctions of the ideas also, and we also talked about the differences between impressions and ideas. Okay, but if you feel that there is something that we can discuss further about this, we can discuss, or we can go into Locke's extract. Okay, so let's go into the extract on John Locke, and we will be talking about John Locke.
Can you please repeat the questions from this part? I have missed, so that's why.
From John Locke?
No, sir. From David.
From okay, from Hume. Oh, sorry, the presentation had stopped. Sorry. Wait. Questions from Hume are just two. David Hume, all the perceptions of the human mind resolve themselves into two distinct kinds. What are those? Briefly explain, and then what is the difference between impressions and ideas? And then from Locke, there are two extracts from Locke, and these are the questions that are there on your screen. You can take a screenshot or you can write them down. You can
Yes, I have taken. Thank you, sir.
Them. Okay, so let's go into Locke. Just a minute. Okay, so here is Locke. I hope you can see my screen, and I'm sure that you also have this particular extract with you. So we are going to discuss the two treatises of government, John Locke's two treatises of government, and the subheading is "The false principles and foundation of Robert Filmer and his followers are detected and overthrown." Give me a minute. Okay. So, like David Hume, John Locke was also an English philosopher. He was also a physician, Enlightenment thinker, one of the empiricists, and he was also interested in political philosophy, and he influenced Voltaire, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and other Scottish and American thinkers also. And I think one of the most famous things about John Locke was his um idea about this tabula rasa. Can anybody tell me what is tabula rasa? I'm sure you have heard of this somewhere. Let me type down the spelling. Tabula rasa, not rasa but rasa, tabula rasa. And this is just a important idea. This is one of the many important ideas of Locke, but this has entered into our consciousness very deeply. So um, this is one of the main contributions of um, Locke to philosophy. Yes, a point where our minds are filled with emptiness. So, at birth, according to John Locke, at birth, our mind is impression free, our mind is free of ideas, our mind is completely blank. We are not born with any ideas, we are not born with any prejudices, we are not born with anything, and our mind is can be compared to an empty vessel. So that is what John Locke thought, or John Locke believed, that since our mind was an empty vessel, anything good or bad can be entered into it, and human beings are not born good or bad, they are born empty, and ideas and feelings, perceptions can create a good person or a bad person out of that particular, out of that person in future. Anyway, that is not really related to our extract here. We are going to see something different here. Chapter 1 and section 1, it is: slavery is so vile and miserable an estate of man, and so directly opposite to the generous temper and courage of our nation, that it is hardly to be conceived that an Englishman, much less a gentleman, should plead for it. So Robert Filmer and his followers were asking the government of England to allow them to engage in slave trade. In your brush with post-colonial literature, you must have read that there are some people, there are some Enlightenment philosophers especially, who were much against this slave trade or this exploitation of the colonies by the European colonizers. John Locke was one of them, and they questioned the premise on which the British colonialists were inhumanly treating other human beings. Because Enlightenment firmly believed in the fact that all humans are alike. There cannot be any distinction between the humans of Africa, India, or Europe. We are all the same. God created us, so we are all same, and we are all intelligent, we are all sentient. So one man cannot be the master of another man. So John Locke says that, and John Locke is opposing the the proposals made by people like Robert Filmer, who was a colonialist and who wanted to indulge in slave trade, and he wanted to make the slave trade legal. It was illegally done initially, and then perhaps it was legalized. I don't know the history of this battle, but say suppose if you if you are told that what if cheating is made legal, like you can open your books, you can open your notes in your exam, and you can write from them. How many of you would be happy to have this thing done? Will it be a good thing, or do you think that will be a very uh, bad thing to happen? That if cheating, if writing, taking notes in the exam, or using Google in the exam is made legal. So something similar was going on in England, that they were asking for slave trade to be made legal, and Locke was very opposed to it. And he said that slavery is vile, it's miserable, a man cannot do this to another man, and it is opposite to the generous temper and courage of our nation. Our nation does not allow, our nation does not um, support this kind of subjugation of one man to another. Okay, so one should not plead for it, one should not agree to it, one should not ask for it. And truly, I should have taken Sir Robert Filmer's Patriarcha as any other treatise which would persuade all mere that, I don't know what all mere, it should be all here, I don't know, that they are slaves and ought to be so, for such another exercise of wit as was his who writ the encomium of Nero. So he says that, and truly I should have taken Sir Robert Filmer's Patriarcha as any other treatise which would persuade all that they are slaves. So Patriarcha was a book written by Sir Robert Filmer, and where he might be saying that we human beings basically are all slave, and we should be slaves, for such another exercise of wit as was his who writ the encomium of Nero. So Nero also believed, the emperor Nero also believed that they engaged in slave trade. I mean, Roman Empire was infamous later in its day for making slaves out of free people, making slaves out of other civilizations. And some people, the court poets of Nero, or somebody who wrote the encomium of Nero, said that, you know, some men should become the slave of other men, some people should become the slave of other people. And Robert Filmer's Patriarcha may be saying the same thing, that slavery is okay, slavery is refers to the natural order of things. Slavery is okay because if you are more powerful than another man, then you can make a slave of that man or woman. Rather than for a serious discourse, meant in earnest, had not the gravity of the title and epistle, the picture in the front of the book, and the applause that followed it, required me to believe that the author and publisher were both in earnest. So he is comparing the encomium of Nero and Robert Filmer's Patriarcha with the encomium of Nero, for being not a serious discourse. Locke is trying to say that one should not take the idea in patriarcha to be serious, just like people did not take Nero seriously or his ideas seriously, and it does not deserve the title, deserve the gravity that it has, and the title and the picture in front of the book, all and the applause that followed the publication of the book. And Locke thinks that the publisher and the author were desperate to just publish it, and they rather took things seriously which they should not have had. And he is talking to the audience, he's talking to the readers of his book, that this book and the ideas inside it are um, as useless as the ideas propounded by Nero about slavery and about the way administration should be carried out. I therefore took it into my hands with all the expectation and read it through with all the attention due to a treatise that made such a noise at its coming aboard, and cannot but confess myself mightily surprised that in a book which was to provide chains for all mankind, I should find nothing but a rope of sand, useful perhaps to such whose skill and business it is to wise a dust, and would blind the people the better to mislead them, but in truth not of any force to draw those bondage who have their eyes open and so much sense about them as to consider that chains are but an ill wearing, how much care soever hath been taken to file and polish them. So look at if we are talking about, if we need to critically appreciate this small extract, and critical appreciation is both on the content and the form of that particular extract, then we can talk a lot about the content, but we should also talk about the style, or we should also talk about the format. Very long, involved sentences with so many clauses, so many connecting clauses, that it often becomes difficult for us to understand where the sentence began and where it ended. It makes the understanding, it makes the comprehension rather difficult when we are trying to understand what is the real meaning of the sentence. Then because of the length of the sentence, we are often lost, and we try to understand the grammar rather than the purport of the sentence. Okay, so we have to go back again and try to understand. I therefore took into my hands with all the expectation and read it through with all the attention due to a treatise. So he had read throughout the book Patriarcha, and he had read it with great deliberation, he had read it with great diligence, because it had made a lot of noise when it was being published. Like, there was a lot of hype about it. But he was surprised that which was to provide chains for all mankind. So Patriarcha was a book which justified slavery, or tried to justify slavery, and hence he says that provide chains for all mankind. What he found was, I should find nothing but a rope of sand. I mean, a rope of sand is not really a rope, because, well, sand is not stable enough to be made into a rope. So, false arguments, flimsy uh, uh, arguments were there in the book. Nothing concrete, nothing logical could be provided by Filmer, and hence he calls these arguments, advices, suggestions to be ropes made up of sand, which can crumble at the touch, which can crumble at the investigation of the same. Useful perhaps to such whose skill and business it is to wise a dust. So this book will be useful only for whom? Only for those who wants to wise a dust, like polish dust, or build with dust, play with dust. That is all. This book will be helpful for vain people, because this book is a vain book, this book is a useless book, and it will be useful for people who are themselves useless. The better to mislead them, and this book can mislead people. This book can blind people. Now, if we consider this book to be a kind of an a pamphlet, then when some government officer, when some government people, publish some book, publish some pamphlet, or they publish their agenda for the election, it is basically to mislead people, not to give them the right ideas, but to mislead them, to confuse them. Okay, they say that, we will give you jobs, and we will make roads, and we will do this, and we will do that, but actually they do not do anything like that, and they are always trying to uh, mislead us. So this book could be a symbol for government pamphlets, or sorry, not government pamphlets, but political agendas. But in truth, not only any force to draw those into bondage who have their eyes open. So anybody who is alive, anybody who has eyes, anybody who has some kind of conscience, should not talk about, should not believe, should not even think about drawing people into bondage. So eyes open here means having conscience and so much sense about them, and if they are sensible, if they are sensitive, if they are intelligent, as to consider that chains are but an ill wearing. I mean, we should consider that chain, bondage, slavery, exploitation, no matter what, in what way they are bad for the society, and how much care soever has been taken to file and polish them. No matter how glamorous, no matter how benevolent slavery appears, it is always slavery, and slavery is always bad. You cannot justify slavery in any way by any language whatsoever. Say the Britishers told us that we have made bridges and we have made railways for you, we have established a system of order in the society. Before us there was only mutual squabbles, but even that is not good enough to justify the way the Britishers had made slaves of us and had exploited our country politically and financially. So this is what John Locke is saying in one of the treatises, is one of the ideas about government. However, I had set this question that what are the two treatises of um, government, but I have also no, sorry, I have not. The questions are: critically appreciate two treatises of government and analyze the theme of the first treatise. So the theme of the first treatise is definitely about opposition of slavery. Okay, and how he goes about uh, defending the right to liberty and the right to freedom, and how he disparages and how he debates against the uh, uh, false principles and foundations of Sir Robert Filmer, who wants to legalize or who wants to indulge himself in slave trade. And talking about the critical appreciation, try to uh, bring in the following considerations. I'm saying one by one. So, in any critical appreciation, you might go for uh, a number of points, a number of technical details. So, first, you can talk about the theme of the piece. Okay, the theme of the piece, the tone of the piece, and then the choice of words, and then any figures of speech used. These are basically the technical points on which you can develop a critical appreciation of anything, of a short story, of a poem, of an extract like this. And you can add a few more things about the clarity of thought. You can talk about sentence structures. I already talked about the involved or intricate, complicated sentence structures, which again leads to the fifth point, that we do not have much clarity here. Like, we have to read it again and again in order to understand what is being talked about here, and every point is actually connected with another point, because when you're talking about the theme, then the tone is also coming out, because if you are defending your topic, then you are passionate about it, you write long sentences. Maybe when you become passionate, you use long sentences in the argument. And the choice of words are also symptomatic of your tone. The tone of the piece, the tone of the extract becomes clear with the choice of the words that you have. And any figures of speech, any metaphors, any similes, any kind of rhetorical devices that have been used, which I think have been used in this piece also, in this extract also, whether there is a clarity of thought or not, whether the extract is able to tell you what it really wants to tell you, or is there some kind of a complexity, whether there is some kind of a misunderstanding that is happening, or and then there is sentence structures also, which might go a little earlier than the clarity of thought, because I mean these kinds of texts were written in kind of involved, complex, intricate, complicated, intricate and complicated manner, which was a feature of the way in which they wrote. This was a feature of their style, So you can keep these things in mind when you're writing the critical appreciation of the extract. And we already talked about the theme of the extract in detail. Okay. Any questions from this section? Or we can go into the last or the second extract, which is on John Locke essay on human understanding, and it is from chapter 1, no innate speculative principles. This might be related, this might be associated with the idea that our minds at our birth are completely free of any expression, any impressions or ideas or prejudices. Okay, since we are talking about innate speculative principles, innate means something that is already there. Innate is something that you are born with. Okay, so the way shown how we come by any knowledge, the knowledge is a capital K, because I think it was in the original text written so I have not changed the capital of knowledge, sufficient to prove it not innate. So here in this extract, John Locke is trying to show that we are not born with knowledge, but we come by knowledge, we achieve knowledge, we amass knowledge, we have to go to knowledge. Knowledge is not something that comes automatically. Okay, so that is the theme of this extract, you can say. So the question, that is what is the main contention of an essay concerning human understanding, is that knowledge is not something that we are born with. Knowledge is something that we achieve. Knowledge is something that we earn. Okay, and we will also talk about the innate principles according to Locke. So what are the innate qualities of knowledge? Is there something innate about knowledge? Is there something automatic or spontaneous? Is there something that is already there about knowledge? It is an established opinion amongst some men that there are in the understanding certain innate principles, some primary notions, and I think this is Latin, coivi, evoi, I don't know. So the primary notions is translated into Latin into this. Characters, as it were, stamped upon the mind of man, which the soul receives in its very first being and brings into the world with it. So he is opposed to the notion that we are born with primary notions. We are, say, suppose if we can have a debate on this, that do you guys think that you are born with some talent, or you achieve some kind of talent? What do you think? Who is a singer here? Any singer, any dancer, artists? None? Come on. There must be people who sing amongst you. Or are you too tired for the day to even venture into an understanding of your talents? Ishita, what's your talent?
So I have no talent, but I understand that each and everyone who have talent, they just gain it by their years of experience, and that is their way or field of interest also.
So, according to you, we are never born with any kind of talent. We achieve it, we come by it through hard work, or we come by it through studying and stuff like that.
Yes, I think so, because after we born, even our father and mother, our parents teach us how to walk, how to eat. So these are our natural or means natural habits. So this also comes from years of experience and learning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other ideas from any other persons present here? Who would disagree that no, we are born with some kind of a talent, we are born with some strength. So Samson Agonistus, was he born with it, or whatever he had it, or did he achieve it? And I'm trying to make a connection between this abstract philosophical idea of John Locke with another text where this notion could be brought into play. I mean, it's easy in Beggar's Opera. Like, if I say that, okay, were these people born thieves and highwaymen and prostitutes? You would say no, no. Uh, the situation of the society forced them to do all of those things. But what about Samson Agonistus? Trijit, what do you think? Trijit, are you here?
Yes, sir.
Hmm. So what do you think? Was Samson born with it, or he achieved it?
Sir, actually, Samsung born with. Actually, according to Samsung, he thinks that he born with the blessings of God.
Okay. So he was born with the strength. Yes, maybe he was born with the strength, but he was not born with the right purpose. The purpose he achieved after he failed in his initial mission, and hence you can say that though a man can be born with a kind of strength, bodily strength, a man, a woman, or a person can be tall. Like, you cannot be tall if you are not born tall. What I mean to say is that if tallness is not in your genes, then you're not going to become tall, right? So no matter if you are born with a dark tone and you do not like it, somebody does not like it. I did not like it when I was young, and no matter how much Vico turmeric or no matter how much fair and handsome we rub on our dark skin, it's not going to turn white or fair. Uh, so we might be born with some physical attributes, but to be to have to be born with some innate notions, primary notions, which God has given us or something, that is not true according to Locke. If we are a good singer, we have learned to become good singer. If we are good painters, we have learned how to paint. if we are good orators, then we have learned how to speak publicly. Okay, so on and so forth. And that argument can be extended to say that we are not born good or evil, we become good or evil, and that is a matter of a huge debate. Okay. It would be sufficient to convince unprejudiced readers of the falseness of this supposition if I only should show, as I hope I shall in the following parts of this discourse, how men, barely by the use of their natural faculties, may attain to all the knowledge they have, without the help of any innate impressions, and may arrive at certainty without any such original notions or principles. Now, this is what the real argument is, that you can achieve any knowledge without being born, or so called being born, with certain advantages or disadvantages. This is against racism, this is against any kind of prejudice, and we can say that we sometimes say, oh, he is born into the poor rickshaw puller's family, that person can never become a chartered accountant, or never become a professor or a doctor or an engineer. We might say that, but Locke is saying no, you are not born with anything, good or bad. If you want to achieve knowledge, you can achieve knowledge, and I think Ungira's understanding about enlightenment comes from this piece, where an individual is given some kind of autonomy, where the individual is having some kind of an agency in his own life, his or her life. Okay. For I imagine anyone will easily grant that it would be impertinent to suppose the ideas of colors innate in a creature to whom God hath given sight, and a power to receive them by the eyes from external objects. And no less unreasonable would it be to attribute several truths to the impressions of nature and innate characters, when we may observe in ourselves faculty fit to attain as easy and certain knowledge of them as if they were originally imprinted on the mind. So, this is an impertinent idea, this is a bad idea, to think that we were born with the knowledge of the world, because the names of the colors and the colors themselves and the connotations associated with them becomes apparent only when we are taught the names of the colors or the shapes or anything that we acquire gradually with our advancing age. So we have these faculty, we develop these faculties to attain a knowledge about it. What we take for granted, that okay, our knowledge of language is something that is innate. No, it is not. The knowledge of the language is also something that we develop over time and lose over time. Okay, if you lock a child forever in a dark room, neither will he develop his faculties of sight, neither will he develop his faculties of smell, neither will he develop his faculties of hearing, touch, language, anything. So it all depends upon external stimuli, according to Locke. But because a man is not permitted without censure to follow his own thoughts in the search of truth, when they lead him ever so little out of the common road, I shall set down the reasons that made me doubt of the truth of that opinion as an excuse for my mistake, if I be in one, which I leave to be considered by those who, with me, dispose themselves to embrace truth wherever they find it. So, but because a man is not permitted without censure to follow his own thoughts in the search of truth, when they lead him ever so little out of the common road. Now, Locke is saying something that is not common, that was not commonly believed back then, and therefore he was censured, he was ridiculed, he was made fun of, because he was thinking out of the box. Because everybody thought that God has given us everything that we need, and God is great, and because we have, because they have given, because God has given us everything, God God is great, and without God we would not be anything. But Locke is saying that no, we are not born with anything, we achieve everything by our own faculties, and that he needs to prove in this essay, which he will prove by various arguments and various uh, discussions. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this essay also. And the question that what are innate principles, that innate principles are simply something that according to Locke, men and women are born with. So that's the most simple definition of innate principles. Okay. Orchok, again, do you have the list of questions that I provided to, I think, in the Google group? Have you gone through it? My question is, do you have the list of the questions that I provided to you guys? Like, I think I provided to you in the Google group also. Do you have it?